I presume everybody has heard of me. My name is the Signora Psyche Zenobia. This I know to be a fact. Nobody but my enemies ever calls me Suki Snobs. I have been assured that Suki is but a vulgar corruption of Psyche, which is good Greek and means the soul. That's me, I'm all soul. And sometimes a butterfly, which latter meaning alludes to my appearance in my new crimson satin dress, with the sky blue Arabian mantelet and the trimmings of green agraffas, and the 7 flounces of orange-colored auriculas. As for snobs, any person who should look at me would be instantly aware that my name wasn't Snobs. Miss Tabitha Turnip propagated that report through sheer envy. Tabitha Turnip indeed. Oh, the little wretch, but what can we expect from a turnip? Wonder if she remembers the old adage about blood out of a turnip. Mem. Put her in mind of it the first opportunity. Mem. Again, pull her nose. Where was I? I have been assured that Snobs is a mere corruption of Zenobia, and that Zenobia was a queen. So am I. Dr. Moneypenny always calls me the Queen of Hearts. And that Zenobia, as well as Psyche, is good Greek, and that my father was a Greek, and that consequently I have a right to our original patronymic, which is Zenobia, and not by any means Snobs. Nobody but Tabitha Turnip calls me Suki Snobs. I am the Signora Psyche Zenobia. As I said before, everybody has heard of me. I am that very Signora Psyche Zenobia, so justly celebrated as corresponding secretary to the Philadelphia Regular Exchange Teetotal Young Belles Lettres Universal Experimental Bibliographical Association to Civilize Humanity. Dr. Moneypenny made the title for us and says he chose it because it sounded big like an empty rum puncheon. A vulgar man that sometimes, but he's deep. We all sign the initials of the society after our names in the fashion of the RSA, Royal Society of Arts, the SDUK, Society for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge. Dr. Moneypenny says that S stands for stale and that Duke spells duck, but it don't, and that SDUK stands for stale duck and not for Lord Brougham's Society. But then Dr. Moneypenny is such a queer man that I am never sure when he is telling me the truth. At any rate, we always add to our names the initials Pretty Blue Batch. That is to say, Philadelphia Regular Exchange Teetotal Young Belles Lettres Universal Experimental Bibliographical Association to Civilize Humanity, 1 letter for each word, which is a decided improvement upon Lord Brougham. Dr. Moneypenny will have it that our initials give our true character, but for my life I can't see what he means. Notwithstanding the good offices of the doctor and the strenuous exertions of the association to get itself into notice, it met with no very great success until I joined it. The truth is, members indulged in too flippant a tone of discussion. The papers read every Saturday evening were characterized less by depth than buffoonery. They were all whipped syllabub. There was no investigation of first causes, first principles. There was no investigation of anything at all. There was no attention paid to that great point, the fitness of things. In short, there was no fine writing like this. It was all low, very. No profundity, no reading, no metaphysics, nothing which the learned call spirituality and which the unlearned choose to stigmatize as Kant. Dr. M says I ought to spell Kant with a capital K, but I know better. When I joined the society, it was my endeavor to introduce a better style of thinking and writing, and all the world knows how well I have succeeded. We get up as good papers now in the Pretty Blue Batch as any to be found even in Blackwood. I say Blackwood because I have been assured that the finest writing upon every subject is to be discovered in the pages of that justly celebrated magazine. We now take it for our model upon all themes, and are getting into rapid notice accordingly. And after all, it's not so very difficult a matter to compose an article of the genuine Blackwood stamp, if one only goes properly about it. Of course, I don't speak of the political articles. Everybody knows how they are managed, since Dr. Moneypenny explained it. Mr. Blackwood has a pair of tailor's shears, and 3 apprentices who stand by him for orders. One hands him the Times, another the Examiner, and a third a Gully's new compendium of slang-wang. Mr. B merely cuts out and intersperses. It is soon done. Nothing but Examiner, slang-wang, and Times, then Times, slang-wang, and Examiner, and then Times, Examiner, and slang-wang. Here I assured him I had an excellent pair of garters and would go and hang myself forthwith. Good, he replied, do so, although hanging is somewhat hackneyed. Perhaps you might do better. Take a dose of Brandreth's pills and then give us your sensations. However, my instructions will apply equally well to any variety of misadventure, and in your way home you may easily get knocked in the head, or run over by an omnibus, or bitten by a mad dog, or drowned in a gutter. But to proceed, having determined upon your subject, you must next consider the tone or manner of your narration. There is the tone didactic, the tone enthusiastic, the tone sentimental, and the tone natural, all commonplace enough, but then there is the tone laconic or curt, which has lately come much into use. It consists in short sentences, somehow thus: can't be too brief, can't be too snappish, always a full stop, and never a paragraph. Then there is the tone elevated, diffusive, and interjectional. Some of our best novelists patronize this tone. The words must be all in a whirl like a humming top and make a noise very similar, which answers remarkably well instead of meaning. This is the best of all possible styles where the writer is in too great a hurry to think. The tone mystic is also a good one, but requires some skill in the handling. The beauty of this lies in a knowledge of innuendo. Hint all and assert nothing. If you desire to say bread and butter, do not by any means say it outright. You may say anything and everything approaching to bread and butter. You may hint at buckwheat cake, or you may even go as far as to insinuate oatmeal porridge. But if bread and butter is your real meaning, be cautious, my dear Miss Psyche, not on any account to say bread and butter. I assured him that I would never say it again as long as I lived. He continued, there are various other tones of equal celebrity, but I shall only mention two more, the tone metaphysical and the tone heterogeneous. In the former, the merit consists in seeing into the nature of affairs a very great deal farther than anybody else. This second sight is very efficient when properly managed. A little reading of Coleridge's Table Talk will carry you a great way. If you know any big words, this is your chance for them. Talk of the Ionic and Eleatic schools, of Archytas, Gorgias, and Alcmaeon. Say something about objects and subjects. Be sure and abuse a man called Locke. Turn up your nose at things in general. And when you let slip anything very unconscionably absurd, you need not be at the trouble of scratching it out, but just put in a footnote and say you are indebted for the above profound observation to the Kritik der reinen Vernunft, or to the Metaphysische Anfangsgründe der Naturwissenschaft. This will look erudite and at the same time frank. As for the tone heterogeneous, it is merely a judicious mixture in equal proportions of all the other tones in the world, and is consequently made up of everything deep, great, odd, piquant, pertinent, and pretty. Let us suppose now you have determined upon your incidents and tone. The most important portion, in fact the soul of the whole business, is yet to be attended to. I allude to the filling up. It is not to be supposed that a lady or gentleman either has been leading the life of a bookworm, and yet above all things is it necessary that your article have an air of erudition, or at least afford evidence of extensive general reading. Now I'll put you in the way of accomplishing this point. See here, pulling down some 3 or 4 ordinary-looking volumes and opening them at random. By casting your eye down almost any page of any book in the world, you will be able to perceive at once a host of little scraps of either learning or bel esprit-ism, which are the very thing for the spicing of a Blackwood article. You might as well note down a few while I read them to you. I shall make 2 divisions. First, piquant facts for the manufacture of similes, and second, piquant expressions to be introduced as occasion may require. Right now, and I wrote as he dictated, piquant facts for similes. There were originally but 3 muses, Melite, Mneme, and Auidi, meditation, memory, and singing. You may make a great deal of that little fact if properly worked. You see, it is not generally known and looks recherché. You must be careful and give the thing with a downright improviso air. Again, the river Alpheus passed beneath the sea and emerged without injury to the purity of its waters. Rather stale, that, to be sure, but if properly dressed and dished up will look quite as fresh as ever. Here is something better. The Persian iris appears to some persons to possess a sweet and very powerful perfume, while to others it is perfectly scentless. Fine that, and very delicate. Turn it about a little and it will do wonders. We'll have something else in the botanical line. There's nothing goes down so well, especially with the help of a little Latin. Right. The Epidendrum floss aeris of Java bears a very beautiful flower and will live when pulled up by the roots. The natives suspend it by a cord from the ceiling and enjoy its fragrance for years. That's capital. That will do for the similes. Now for the piquant expressions. piquant expressions. The venerable Chinese novel Zhu Qiao Li. Good. By introducing these few words with dexterity, you will evince your intimate acquaintance with the language and literature of the Chinese. With the aid of this, you may possibly get along without either Arabic or Sanskrit or Chickasaw. There is no passing muster, however, without French, Spanish, Italian, German, Latin, and Greek. I must look you out a little specimen of each. Any scrap will answer because you must depend upon your own ingenuity to make it fit into your article. Now write. Aussi tendre que Zaire, as tender as Zaire, French, alludes to the frequent repetition of the phrase La tendre Zaire in the French tragedy of that name. Properly introduced will show not only your knowledge of the language, but your general reading and wit. You can say, for instance, that the chicken you were eating, write an article about being choked to death by a chicken bone, was not altogether aussi tendre que Zaire. Write, ven muerte tan escondida, que no te sienta venir, porque el placer del morir no me torne a dar la vida. That's Spanish, from Miguel de Cervantes. Come quickly, O death, but be sure and don't let me see you coming, lest the pleasure I shall feel at your appearance should unfortunately bring me back again to life. This you may slip in quite apropos when you are struggling in the last agonies with the chicken bone. Write, il pover uomo che non se n'era accorto, andava combattendo, e era morto. That's Italian, you perceive, from Ariosto. It means that a great hero, in the heat of combat, not perceiving that he had been fairly killed, continued to fight valiantly, dead as he was. The application of this to your own case is obvious, for I trust, Miss Psyche, that you will not neglect to kick for at least an hour and a half after you have been choked to death by that chicken bone. Please to write, unsterbisch doch so sterbisch den Durchsie. That's German, from Schiller. And if I die, at least I die, for thee. Here it is clear that you are apostrophizing the cause of your disaster, the chicken. Indeed, what gentleman or lady either of sense wouldn't die, I should like to know, for a well-fattened capon of the right Maluka breed, stuffed with capers and mushrooms and served up in a salad bowl with orange jellies on mosaics. Right. You can get them that way at Tortoni's. Right, if you please. Here is a nice little Latin phrase, and rare too. One can't be too recherché or brief in one's Latin, it's getting so common. Ignoratio elenchi. He has committed an ignoratio elenchi. That is to say, he has understood the words of your proposition, but not the ideas. The man was a fool, you see, some poor fellow whom you addressed while choking with that chicken bone, and who therefore didn't precisely understand what you were talking about. Throw the ignoratio elenchi in his teeth, and at once you have him annihilated. If he dares to reply, you can tell him from Lucan, here it is, that his speeches are mere anemone verbatim, anemone words. The anemone, with great brilliancy, has no smell. Or if he begins to bluster, you may be down upon him with insomnia Jovis, reveries of Jupiter, a phrase which Silius Italicus, see here, applies to thoughts pompous and inflated. This will be sure and cut him to the heart. He can do nothing but roll over and die. Will you be kind enough to write? In Greek we must have something pretty from Demosthenes, for example. Honor o theogon kai pollen maxetai. There is a tolerably good translation of it in Hudibras. For he that flies may fight again, which he can never do that's slain. In a Blackwood article nothing makes so fine a show as your Greek. The very letters have an air of profundity about them. Only observe, madam, the acute look of that epsilon. That phi ought certainly to be a bishop. Was ever there a smarter fellow than that Omicron? Just twig that tau. In short, there's nothing like Greek for a genuine sensation paper. In the present case, your application is the most obvious thing in the world. Rap out the sentence with a huge oath and by way of ultimatum at the good-for-nothing dunder-headed villain who couldn't understand your plain English in relation to the chicken bone. He'll take the hint and be off, you may depend upon it. These were all the instructions Mr. B could afford me upon the topic in question, but I felt they would be entirely sufficient. I was at length able to write a genuine Blackwood article and determined to do it forthwith. In taking leave of me, Mr. B made a proposition for the purchase of the paper when written, but as he could only offer me 50 guineas a sheet, I thought it better to let our society have it than sacrifice it for so paltry a sum. Notwithstanding this miserly spirit, however, the gentleman showed his consideration for me in all other respects and indeed treated me with the greatest civility. His parting words made a deep impression upon my heart, and I hope I shall always remember them with gratitude. "My dear Miss Zenobia," he said while tears stood in his eyes, "is there anything else I can do to promote the success of your laudable undertaking? Let me reflect. It is just possible that you may not be able as soon as convenient to get yourself drowned or choked with a chicken bone or hung and or bitten by a... But stay. Now I think me of it, there are a couple of very excellent bulldogs in the yard. Fine fellows, I assure you, savage and all that. Indeed, just the thing for your money. They'll have you eaten up, auriculas and all, in less than 5 minutes. Here's my watch. And then only think of the sensations. Here, I say, Tom, Peter, Dick, you villain, let out those." But as I was really in a great hurry and had not another moment to spare, I was reluctantly forced to expedite my departure, and accordingly took leave at once, somewhat more abruptly, I admit, than strict courtesy would have otherwise allowed. It was my primary object upon quitting Mr. Blackwood to get into some immediate difficulty pursuant to his advice, and with this view I spent a greater part of the day in wandering about Edinburgh seeking for desperate adventures. Adventures adequate to the intensity of my feelings and adapted to the vast character of the article I intended to write. In this excursion I was attended by my Negro servant Pompey and my little lapdog Diana, whom I had brought with me from Philadelphia. It was not, however, until late in the afternoon that I fully succeeded in my arduous undertaking. An important event then happened, of which the following Blackwood article, in the tone heterogeneous, is the substance and result.